Thank you. It's so exciting to be here, and I'm glad there are still some left standing, or sitting, should I say. I am Alisa Ellis, and I am a mother of 7 kids who has had all of my kids in the public school system. And last year, it was the first time I heard about Common Core, started asking questions, and I'm now in a whole new world, sitting in a room full of people talking about classical education, things that I never had even pondered or thought one bit about until this year. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you, Oak, for asking me to speak. Common Core, I wasn't going to get into the details because Oak asked me to expand onto the bigger picture, but I'll give a basic definition. It is a set of common standards that are common with all the states in the United States. Well, 47 states have adopted them. Mandated, questionable. Coerced, yes, very, very strongly. The governor said these are a set of minimum standards. And I pulled these slides out of this presentation, but I strongly beg to differ. There are numerous documents in the Federal Department of Ed, on all their definition pages, Race to the Top applications, No Child Left Behind waiver, that all say that these needed to be common standards with a significant number of states, and you can add up to 15%. And when our state board approved them, they agreed to adopt them as written, and that they would not take anything out, and that they would only add up to 15%. Now, it was brought to their attention, the cursive being taken out, and they decided after many people wrote them letters that they would review it. They're going to study it for a year to see if it's worth putting cursive back into the standards. So how did we get from here? Now, this slide is from a study by UNICEF and UNESCO in 5 countries that I'll get into later to here. This is a map of funding that is pouring into Common Core, and I'm not going to get into all of this, and it's just like a giant thing. And on the internet, a friend of ours from Oklahoma that has been researching this, she compares it to an Obama Care slide where they have all the funding going in, and it's a very similar mapping. So we are where we are right now. Our state has agreed to adopt Common Core state standards. How did we get here? So I'm going to go back through a little bit of a timeline. So in 1990, and I know that there's much more beyond, earlier than this, but this is where I'm going to start. There was a World Conference for Education where they declared that they needed to have education for all. And it sounds great. I want every child to have an education. I want them to be able to learn. And so that's where they get you. But it's moving us to a global society. In 2000, they had another conference where they just reaffirmed those goals. So what are the goals? Expanding early childhood care and education, ensuring that by the year 2015, all children will have free and compulsory primary education, that all young people and adults, so I want you guys to think back at some of the philosophies that you've heard today, will have access to appropriate learning and life skills programs, improvement in adult literacy by 2015, and eliminating gender disparities in primary and secondary education, and achieving gender equality in education by 2015. A lot of these, on the surface, they sound like reasonable goals. Improving all aspects of education and ensuring excellence so that learning outcomes are achieved by all, especially in literacy, numeracy, and essential life skills. So let's go back to this study. This was in 1994, and it was a joint effort where they took 5 pilot countries: China, Jordan, Mali, sorry, it's going slower, I can't pronounce this one, Mauritius, and Morocco, and they studied them, and they came up with a common core of basic competency skills and life skills, and the express aim of providing national decision makers with practical tools for monitoring basic education in their country and building national capacities. And so here we have their rough draft. So we move forward a couple years later, and we're introduced to Agenda 21, which we've heard a little bit about. And it's a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. So this is where we get to the progressive idea of putting Mother Earth ahead. They have a chapter devoted to education, because education is critical for promoting sustainable development. While basic education provides the underpinning for any environmental and development education, the latter needs to be incorporated as an essential part of learning. So you may be thinking, so what? They had a meeting in Chicago, not in Chicago, sorry, that's my other presentation. They had a meeting, and it was 20 years ago. How does it affect me? Well, our government officials were there. They agreed on to do this. So in the Education for All, George H.W. Bush was there, and they agreed to it. Agenda 21 was when President Clinton was the president. If I'm wrong, correct me on that. Was it still George Bush? Yes, I knew that. So to be effective, basically they're saying that they need to integrate this in all disciplines and should employ formal and non-formal methods and effective means of communication. They have education goals. They're going to endorse the Education for All and ensure universal access to basic education. Now remember, they're having a study to figure out what that is. They're going to achieve environmental and developmental awareness in all sectors of society on a worldwide scale, strive to achieve environmental and development education from primary school age through adulthood to all groups of people, promote integration of environment and development concepts, including demography, in all educational programs. They want this everywhere. So you're wondering, how does this affect us now? This is from the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, in 2010 at the Sustainability Summit. Today, I promise you that the Department of Education will be a committed partner in the national effort to build a more environmentally literate and responsible society. We must advance the sustainability movement through education. Education and sustainability are the keys to our economic future and our ecological future. This is from Africa, and they took the framework from those 5 pilot countries, and then they're able to, I should have put this slide up there. I can't remember the year, but anyways, by the end of this pilot, they did the first 5 countries, and then by the end, I think they had done 70 pilot countries where they were implementing these basic competency skills and trying to figure out what was the common theme in all of these countries. So it says that Africa says there is further need to refine the common core skills: literacy, language arts, life skills within education for sustainable development perspective and across all forms of learning. So they had this international work group, and it was tasked with seeking consensus on a set of common core indicators of quality education and primary education for a broad range of countries, and providing recommendations to be considered by relevant national and international stakeholders. I don't remember who gave the presentation where they showed who was in charge of the children. when they had, I don't remember who it was, they had a graph and they showed the state and the children and the parents. Many of the documents we find, parents were stakeholders. So I don't know if on national. So this is an example of their common content and performance standards. Does it look similar at all? I mean, it's not exactly the same idea. So then we fast forward to the year 2000, and they had reaffirmed that they were going to achieve the education for all. And then there was also this Millennial Development Summit. And we were the host country. President Clinton was the president, and he was in attendance there. And we recognize that in addition to our separate responsibilities to our individual societies, we have a collective responsibility to uphold the principles of human dignity, equality, and equity at the global level. There's a real movement to break down the barriers between our countries and to have a one world government, basically. Their goals sound great. End poverty and hunger, universal education, child health, maternal health, combat AIDS and HIV, environmental sustainability, and to create a global partnership. They're lofty goals, right? So a lot of these things were then enacted with different laws. We had Goals 2000. I wasn't a teacher, and I was just kind of following along with the masses at the time. But my friend Renee, who's been studying this with me, she was a teacher, and she remembers all these. Then we had No Child Left Behind. And Mrs. Bush and Margaret Spellings, they commit to the United States goals to UNESCO's plans. UNESCO, I guess I didn't identify, is the education arm of the United Nations, if you didn't know that. So then we fast forward to 2004. Bill Gates signed a contract with UNESCO, that education arm, where he initialed every single page, and he pledged to advance the Millennium Development Goals for universal basic education, master syllabus for teacher training. UNESCO is responsible for content development, supports objectives of the UNESCO's constitution. And since signing that contract, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has poured over $100 million into the development of the Common Core State Standards. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because when I was researching their grant website, there is much more, because I saw grants to computer game sites in the name of Common Core. So it's not just these main players, they're inundating everything that they can get their hands on. Just this year, in September, there was announced by Education First, by the UN Secretary General's Global Initiative on Education, another $1.5 billion in commitments to achieve the universal education goals. So the General Secretary says, we must spare no effort to achieve the MDG goals by 2015. We have 3 years and 3 months. We must intensify our work. The battle's just heating up. This is our collective responsibility. 3 priorities over the next 5 years. Putting every child in school. Sounds great. Improving the quality of education. Another great goal. Fostering global citizenship through education. I'm not sure that I appreciate that goal very much. Who committed this $1.5 billion? You may know some of these names. This is just one initiative. So in 2010, the United States put out their strategy for meeting the Millennium Goals. And this was on this site, mcc.gov, and I thought, mcc.gov? Never heard of it. So I looked it up. It's Millennium Challenge Corporation, and it was created in 2004 through an act of Congress. And they say that the United States also is an active participant in Education for All to provide universal education, and in the Education for All Fast Track initiative to ensure accelerated progress towards achieving quality universal primary education. The United States remains committed to advance global education. Now remember, one of the goals was to expand early childhood education. UNESCO advocates for early childhood care and education, and they say that they're going to attend to health, nutrition, security, and learning. And the United Nations believes that we should have a uniform global education system, and that every children, even from birth, should have rights to an early education. When did it become their job to take our babies and decide what they needed to be educated with? Oh, sorry. So with that, they created an action agenda for early childhood education called the Moscow Framework, and I haven't even started researching that. But you'll notice, if you start looking around in our government things, that early childhood education is being pushed. You walk through the schools, there's free signs all over. Free, free, preschool, come get free preschool. So what does our current administration, now I do not want to stand here and blame President Obama. I don't agree with him, but this is not him. This has happened with all the past presidents from both parties, where they have agreed to this agenda. But we're here now, and this is who we're dealing with, and these are his goals, and we need to do something about it. Arne Duncan, in 2009, said, "Let me start by talking about the unique, historic, and powerful opportunity we have to transform public education. We have a perfect storm for reform. We have the Obama effect. We have leadership on the Hill and in the unions." Remember, they had the majority. And the Democrats did, who were typically more progressive. At least that's what we'd like to think. Until you start really looking around, and you'll notice that it's not just them. Proven strategies for success and the Recovery Act. All this money, providing $100 billion towards education. In a speech to UNESCO, so this is across the sea, he says that traditionally, the federal government in the U.S. has had a limited role in education. But the Obama administration is seeking to fundamentally shift that role. You hear a lot of fundamentally shift in the Obama administration. So he says that President Obama is committed to develop a 0 to 5 system for early learning for all children. That's why it's the goal of this administration to ensure that every child has access to complete education from the day they are born to the day they begin their career. Now, we're seeing these things tried to get pushed in through our state, and they're saying it's for the poor, the people that need it. Nobody's helping them. We need to help them. That's where it starts. They're just getting their foot in the door. So this is in November of 2010. He says, in March of 2009, the president called on the nation's governors and said, "I want you to develop standards and assessments." Virtually everyone thought the president was dreaming. But today, 37 states and the District of Columbia have already chosen to adopt the new state-crafted Common Core standards in math and English. Not studying it, not thinking about it, not issuing a white paper. They actually did it. They're laughing at us right here. I can't believe they were so foolish. How'd they do it? Money. Lots and lots of money. Now this one is a new one for me. State Fiscal Stabilization Fund went to every single state. And this is from the stimulus bill of 2009. And it went to the governors. And then they were to divvy it out to the local LEAs. But they only could get it if they made assurances that they would reform our standards. Race to the top. States were given more points if they joined in the effort. Race to the top for assessments. States required to join consortium. Consortium required that we join the standards. And then I've researched this since creating this slide. And if you go to the definition page of race to the top for the assessments, it defines that they should be the standards themselves too. So race to the top for the districts, that's a new one. They just extended it when the hurricane hit, and I don't know where it's at right now. So that money's being offered directly to the state, the local districts. No Child Left Behind waivers. Nobody liked it. Everybody is running for these waivers. They're not studying it. They're not thinking about it. They're just doing it. And it's difficult to receive that without joining the Common Core effort. Virginia, right now, I believe, is the only state that was issued a waiver. And it's funny that it was right before the election and they're a swing state. I'm not going to go through all these. I don't think I have time, but I'll just put them up here on here. Race the top priorities. So these are just kind of the goals, and I just want you to look through them and see what you see that's similar to the goals of the United Nations. So we have education reform. I guess I didn't get into the STEM, but if you go deeper into the goals, they have where they, I just put up the basic goals, but they have calls for that. Early learning outcomes, that's where they call for the early childhood education. The P20, I'll get into that in just a minute. Data collection, common achievement standards, common standards, state fiscal stabilization fund, improved teachers. And I always thought that was a good thing until I started doing this research, and I realized that it could be a way to drive out the teachers that aren't following the agenda. And that's what I'm hearing from teachers that are in my district. So those are some of the things. Joanne Weiss, who's the chief of staff to Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, she says, so I'm shifting gears here, sorry, I put this in the wrong spot, but so remember the P20 data stuff, I'm going to get to that in a second, but I'm moving on to curriculum because the state office, if you go ask them, they'll say these are standards. The teachers can approve their own curriculum, and we're learning that their books are all getting approved, and Wendy Hart wrote a blog, she's a school board member in Alpine, about how they're saying that we can do certain things, but then the books that are teaching this other way aren't on the approved list, basically. So she says, this Joanne Weiss, the development of common standards and shared assessments radically alters the market for innovation in curriculum development, professional development, and formative assessments. Previously, these markets operated on a state-by-state basis and often on a district-by-district basis, but the adoption of common standards and shared assessment systems means that education entrepreneurs will enjoy the benefit of national markets where the best products can be taken to scale. Common Core standards and the assessments, which we got out, but we still have to have our assessments approved through the No Child Left Behind waiver. So ultimately, the federal government is still garnering what we do with our assessments. Takes us on a road to a nationalized education curriculum, which is not allowed in the Constitution. In July of this year, Secretary of Education said that the president established a bold goal for our nation By 2020, the United States will once again have the world's highest proportion of college graduates and the world's most competitive workforce. He has proposed $1 billion into career academies. And they're going to transform, we're going to hear that word again, the CTE program, to achieve their goal, which is their cradle to career reform. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, and some of you have probably heard about the Mark Tucker letter, the School to Work. I can send you that, or if you want information on it. But there is a movement to turn our kids into a little cog in the workforce machine, and that is what we're doing here. And my son, last year before I knew anything, I was at his SEOP, and I had already started questioning Common Core, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and so I asked every teacher, every counselor, everybody, because it just didn't sit right with me. And I was in his planning for his 10th grade year, and the counselor told me, because I asked about Common Core and his thoughts, and he said, I don't like it. And he gave me his reasons why. And then he said, look how smart your son is. Look at his ACT, I think it was the Explorer test. I don't remember what grade it was. And they had this beautiful pie chart with all of his strengths and where he should be and everything he could be in life. And he's so smart, he can do anything. But he's clearly not going to be a history professor. So let's take him out of AP World History and put him in a class that follows his career path. And I said, okay. And I think that's where most parents are. Most parents are right where I was. They trust the system. And before we know it, the America we know will not be here if we don't stand up and do something about it. Data collection. Yes?
Just on your last slide, I just wanted to, this whole technical education thing, I didn't put it together until right now, but a huge proportion of the books that we're receiving to approve are tech school career-oriented.
Yes.
Carpentry, plumbing, scads and scads and scads.
Yeah. Well, so when I first started asking questions about Common Core, and I went up to the state office, and they pulled me in because I was asking too many questions in the meetings and had me talk to the head of the STEM and the head of the GATE program for over an hour. They had me in there trying to explain this diagram to me about how they were moving my kids ahead, and they're showing me that my kids could be in calculus by 12th grade, but my older kids were already going to be there by 11th grade. So I'm trying to figure out how that's ahead when it's really a year behind. And they just kept drawing the diagram for me, and I just kept saying, you're not making sense because my older kids that aren't on Common Core will be doing that in 11th grade, and now you're telling me my 6th grader who's better at math can do that in 12th grade. So we went on for over an hour and circle, and decided to disagree. But I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Career technical. Yes. That's right. Yes. Yes.
Just a really quick comment. Some people might say, so what's wrong with career training?
Yes.
In the context that you've shown it, I think this really gets it. But because we should be accelerating the opportunities for our children to
Yes.
do whatever they want to be.
Exactly.
The government determining who's going to do what. But here's just a really quick thing from one of my favorite people, C.S. Lewis. And he said, vocational training prepares the people not for leisure but for work. It aims at making not a good man, but a good banker, a good electrician, a good scavenger, or a good surgeon. You see at once that education is essentially for free men and vocational training for slaves.
Nice. Real quick, I remembered my thought, and I might forget it. So when I met with them, they told me our kids could not compete to get into Harvard before. We didn't have those opportunities in Utah. And now they're going to be able to. But if you start dissecting what Common Core standards are, they don't prepare your children for a 4-year advanced degree. It is for a 2-year, and it states it plainly. So it's for a 2-year degree or career. And so they're going to start tracking the kids so that they can determine where your kid fits in the system. What are you capable of doing in life? Are you smart enough? Are you talented enough to be all that you want to be? Or are you geared to be whatever they decide that you want to be? And it's not forced. I could have told that counselor no, but I didn't know. I had no clue. And how far down a certain path do we take our kids before they feel so stuck that they don't think they can start over? Because the way the economy is going right now, they're not going to feel like they can quit all this time they've put into going to one path. And we're in a highly LDS population where our kids are going on missions. And what happens? Sorry, they come back different people. They grow up. And they decide who they want to be, what they want to be in life. And if we've set them on a path, ACT is creating tests for 3rd graders to figure out where their career aptitudes lie. What are we doing to our kids? So I know it's getting late. One more quick little section. So the P20W, what is this? We have it in the state of Utah currently. This was mandated by our applications that we put in. And I think I forgot one that says, I forgot a slide that Arne Duncan says, through the Race to the Top, we had all these people making reform, and they didn't get it, but they're still doing the reform, which is exactly what we've been trying to tell the state office, because they say, we didn't get any money. We didn't get 1 red cent. Is that what the quote is? But we still agreed to make all these changes as a state in an effort to get some money, and then we didn't actually get it. It didn't mean that we just turned around and said, oh, forget it. We just keep on rolling. So P stands for preschool, 20 stands for to 20 years old, and W stands for workforce. Most states didn't go to the workforce. We like to go above and beyond. So these are some of the data. So every student, we've had this for years, the SIS system, they're all given a number. Federal regulation was recently changed and loosened so that more of our students' data, individually, personally identifiable data, can be released in behalf of studies by educational representatives on behalf of schools. It doesn't even say educational studies, it says schools, which could be school lunches. I mean, they have dentists and they have everything in the schools now. They're trying to make it the center of our communities. And anyway, so they have these tracking systems. And so now you're given a number. So they say they're going to disaggregate, and then they'll use terms like what do they call it? So it's personal PPI, but then there's another term they started using. No, there's aggregate, disaggregate, but then basically they're saying that it's a personally identifiable number, but they're not supposed to be able to know who it is because your kid's given a number in the system, but it's all their individual data. So, and it says in the FERPA regulation that any reasonable person should be able to go into the school with the information they have and identify that student. So they don't have their name, but anyway, so horizontal data, vertical data, all these terms, longitudinal database systems, what they're doing is they're tracking our kids. And you heard President Obama. He wants to start the day they're born. Thankfully, I guess right now, if you're on any type of WIC, Baby, any of these government systems, you're in there. Your kids are in there. They're given the number. Anyway, so longitudinal, and then longitudinal means that it will follow them all through, and then the workforce means it's going to follow them in the workforce. So they want to, if you look at the last one, or the second to the last, include student groups not now included in the data system. Example, homeschooled. They want all of everyone's stuff. And think about how many programs are being offered for free to the homeschoolers. My sister has felt strongly since she had kids. She's younger than me, and so her oldest is 6, that she wanted to homeschool. She doesn't know anybody that homeschools, so it's my fault. We did K-12 one year with my son, and so I said, you should do K-12. This was like 4 years ago. And so that's what she's doing. And so then as I've now started to meet all these wonderful people that have given me so many wonderful ideas for what education could and should be, I'm trying to tell her, hey, read this. And she said, I'm scared to open the email because I know what I should be doing, but it's a lot of work. And then the other day she told me that, she said, for now, Bella just loves sitting at the computer, doing the little games. So I'm just going to keep her there. And then I was studying for this, and I came across Charlotte, is it Iserbeat? Is that how she goes by? I always don't pronounce the T, I didn't know. So I was reading one of her most recent newsletters, and she talked about the computer programming and some of the documents that she found and how they were going to use computers was an idea to really be able to get at the kids quicker and faster with all the reward systems in computers. So I was just sitting there reading that, thinking of my little 6-year-old niece. There's a sticker. There's a sticker. Here's a sticker. Yay, look at you. And then I walked into my office, and my girls were on Webkins. I didn't know Webkins had math games. Anyway, and she was playing this game. Here's a sticker. There's a sticker for you. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. I'm seeing things through a different light than I ever have before. So anyway, so I just wanted to leave you with a couple of final things. So this is from an initiative it's called What's Global About Common Core Standards. And this Asia Society partnered with CCSSO, which is, quote unquote, one of the originators of the Common Core Standards, unless you go do some research and you see another picture, to define global competence and the skills and abilities that students need to demonstrate to be globally competent. The adoption of the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts and Mathematics in 45 states and the District of Columbia offers educators an unprecedented opportunity to marry the skill development and acquisition of core content needed to develop globally competent citizens. I want to be competent. Don't you? I think their definition and mine are a little bit different. And whose values? This is from Utahns Against Common Core. The evidence shows that powerful and influential people and organizations have collaborated to create a global education system that will track our children and move them toward a global perspective that seeks to erase state and individual sovereignty. And so I leave you with that, and what I would ask you to do. Someone said, educate your friends. I've never been political in my life. I found myself meeting with all sorts of people this year, and the biggest thing that I felt that I'm supposed to be doing is talking to people. Because I can turn, well, it would be really hard, but if I turned the whole state legislature, not me individually, but people, it wouldn't do any good if the people aren't on board. So talk to your friends and neighbors. A lot of people that homeschool, they think they're protected. In Sweden, everywhere they go, at the doctor's office, they're pushing for them to get their kids into daycare at 1. because the government knows better than the families. The families are teaching values that they don't like. You don't think that could happen here? It's happening. So we need to stand up and fight. And I leave that with you. Thank you.